Good evening, America, and welcome to this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report, Ruining Elections Through Ranked Choice Voting. I'm your host, John Solomon. Tonight, in partnership with our sponsor, Heritage Action for America, we're going to explore just how political activists are looking to hijack or exploit our current election system and implement an apparatus called ranked choice voting. A lot of you may not have heard about it, but it is a big deal. It's a new and confusing process that has made it more difficult for a voter to cast his or her ballot and for tabulators and auditors to count and recount votes. Here's how it works. Instead of a citizen voting for the preferred candidate, they will rank all the candidates, no matter the party political affiliation, from first to last choice. After filling out the entire ballot, it's then counted. If no candidate wins more than 50% of the vote, they keep moving down that ballot. It now adds 6 or 7 choices for every race on your ballot. Just think about that. It can take a lot more time to fill out a ballot in any such election. And voters who are selected and obtain a candidate that didn't obtain the plurality automatically have their vote changed to their second preferred choice before another round of tabulation occurs. And while Democrat Party activists continue to wage war through mainstream and through various social media platforms on how our current election system supposedly disenfranchises voters, there is empirical evidence that voters, particularly people of color, are being disenfranchised in the early states that have gone to this style of voting. Tonight, we're going to talk to all sorts of experts on this issue. You're going to get the real download on what's going on here, from a Trump appointee and former federal lawmaker to a congressman who used to oversee voting security in Congress. It is an important issue. It affects all of us, particularly elderly and minority voters. There's been a disproportionate impact on them already. And yet the conversation goes on all across this country. Liberal activists are trying to implement the system in cities and states all across this country. We want to bring you up to speed on tonight. That's our mission. And with that said, we have the perfect first guest tonight. While serving in Congress, he never looked to throw out our election system completely and replace it with ranked choice voting. Rather, he looked for ways to make it easier to vote and harder to cheat, and to grow confidence in our election system, including with the American Confidence in Elections Act. Joining us right now, former Congressman and former Chairman of the House Administration Committee, Congressman Rodney Davis. Sir, good to have you back on the show.
Always great to be on with you, John.
This is a movement that a lot of people haven't heard of, or they're just starting to hear about it, but there's 15 states now that have either ranked choice voting at the local level all the way up to the state level, and Illinois is now considering it for some voters, including military and overseas voters. Tell us how this caught fire.
Well, it caught fire because certain states like Maine and Alaska decided to implement it, and the media's candidates won. And when that happens, what the debate turns into is how good is this process? And boy, isn't it great because our candidate won and candidate B or C did not. You look at Alaska recently. Sarah Palin was able to make it through the primary and through ranked choice voting, was not chosen. That seat was then given up to a Democrat. I believe the process itself, John, is something that's going to be corrupted by political operatives. And I could look back to my first race wondering, would it have turned out the same way by me winning by 1,002 votes if we would have had ranked choice voting in 2012 in Illinois?
Yeah, that's a great point. And we hear constantly from the left and Democrats, and even some Republicans who are now advocating for this. Hey, we're trying to make our system easier to vote and harder to cheat. Does this ranked choice voting actually accomplish that?
I don't think it does. I think it complicates things. We're trying to get people to come vote, low propensity voters to come out to vote, not just in presidential elections, but in every election. You got states like New York, where they won't even begin to count early ballots and mail-in ballots until after the polls close, which means you don't have election day, you have election month. Then you look at states like Florida, where results are in. Results are in that day, they're in early, and people are very confident about the election processes in Florida. Keep in mind, because New York's system is so screwed up, a guy by the name of George Santos was at orientation for House members in 2020 because he was beating eventual victorious candidate Tom Suozzi by thousands of votes on election day. But New York had to count tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of votes afterwards. Imagine how much longer that's going to take with a process like ranked choice that is utterly confusing to many voters.
Yeah. And now, if you're a voter, you're used to going and voting for one candidate per race. Now you said, well, do 6 or 8 or whatever the number is. All of a sudden, the time to vote takes a lot more time. And I assume elderly voters, particularly, this is going to be really cumbersome. Democrats talk, oh, we're for the elderly, we're for minority voters, we're for the disenfranchised. This actually makes it harder for traditionally lower voting populations to really vote, right?
It's amazing to me. Democrats were against lines and backups in polling places until they were for lines and backups in polling places with processes like ranked choice voting.
Wow.
This is, again, John, this is another process that will be corrupted by political operatives. You will have get out the vote messages that will say, vote for candidate A, Republican Davis, for example, number 1, but then make sure you vote for candidate B, Democrat, number 4. It will be corrupted to help your particular candidate. It's just, to me, like a process like ballot harvesting. When Republicans didn't utilize the legal process in a state like California in 2018, Republicans lost. And then Republicans did in 2020 and 2022, and they won. But does that mean that I'm okay with a process that allows some stranger to knock on your door and say, trust me, I'll put your ballot in the box in the back of my car and I will turn it in? No, I would rather have a chain of custody rather than a process that both parties use and take advantage of.
Such an important thing that gets thrown out in all the harvesting discussion. There is no chain of custody in so many of those harvesting circumstances. And you have been an enormous advocate for making voting easier, but also making it more secure. And the security part, I think, is the area where people are really struggling. People are wondering, will my vote really count based on all we've learned? You introduced a piece of legislation that is really groundbreaking for the ideas that it presented. Go through the top most important things about how we restore confidence in elections that you put on the floor of the House.
Well, my fellow committee members on House administration that are still in Congress, Chairman Brian Stile and Chairman of the Oversight Subcommittee, Barry Loudermilk, they were integral in helping us craft a piece of legislation that we introduced last year called the ACE Act. We want to make, as you said, elections easier for everyone to participate in and make sure that you have those who want to cheat, it makes them harder to cheat. First off, we value the Federalist principles that our Constitution gives when it comes to elections. Our Constitution says, yes, there's a federal role, but the election process should be set in the states. Now, I don't want to screw up New York's process. They screw it up enough by having the federal government do it. But we also don't want to screw up what's working in Florida by having a federal solution. And that's what the Democrats tried to do the last few years. But we also have jurisdiction over one city in the United States at the federal level, and that's Washington, D.C. So we put together, and Chairman Stile has made it even better. He has put together a list of best practices that will be implemented in Washington, D.C. And I can't wait to make the heads explode of all those who scream vote suppression, of all those who scream elections are unfair when it comes to the Democratic side of the aisle, when turnout in Washington, if these were implemented, go up. And elections in Washington, the citizens there have more faith in them.
Yeah, we had Chairman Stile on this show just a few weeks ago, and he was singing your praises because you built the foundation for what he is now finishing the legislative house on. It was really impressive to watch that process. Congressman, I want to ask a little bit about Alaska because a lot of people use Sarah Palin and say, hey, that's a really good example how ranked choice can really flip things upside. Someone who is leading in the vote can sometimes not end up winning the race in this. Lisa Murkowski was one of the advocates for this, a Republican. She's won. She's twice flipped from Republican to independent to win. What really went on in Alaska? What's the more of Alaska? We got about a minute left.
You know, I went to Alaska just to see their election process and some of the problems that Alaskans have in administering their own elections by sending equipment out into the tundra, et cetera. But Lisa Murkowski, remember, back in 2010, Lisa lost a primary. She then decided to run in the general election as an independent and won. But when she was up for re-election, Alaska introduced ranked choice voting. And what happened was Lisa was able to win because she had a plurality of second choice votes. And that's where a lot of folks, I'm glad Lisa won. I think she's doing a great job for the citizens of Alaska. But she didn't need to change the process because that exact same process cost us one more seat upon the death of longtime Congressman and my good friend Don Young, because ranked choice voting hurt the Republicans and Democrats. They corrupted the process like I thought they would.
A one-time solution that has long-term bad consequences. Congressman, it is always an honor. You have been a leader in election integrity, and you've left an enormous legacy for us to build on here in Washington. Great to have you on the show today.
Thanks, John. Always great to be with you.
You as well, sir. Thank you so much. All right, folks, stick around. We have a lot more conversation on this hot button issue with Jason Sneed of Honest Elections Project right after these messages.